Hey everyone, today we're going to be building a fairly simple audio player in Flutter. Basically what we're going to try and do is have some sort of random tracks with some prefab data. Obviously you have them in a nice little list here, and have a simple detail page where you can go back and play them and do things like this and 10 seconds ahead and pause, and also have a playback even when you leave the screen. So you can control it down here too. So that's what we're gonna do, and I got this empty project just started here, and let's get to it. First things first, we're gonna add some packages. Just a few for this one. I'm keeping this relatively simple in terms of routing and all that kind of stuff, just as bare bones as we can, and really just focus on the audio. So I'm just gonna throw these in here. So for our dependencies, and we can get rid of the Cupertino icons. We're going to be using audio session, which allows us to sort of have like the OS take over some of the audio controls. We're using just audio and just audio background. We're going to be using the audio video progress bar, which lets us sort of have that tracking of the progress of the track. We're going to use Riverpod for state management, just a little bit of state management in this, and I love Riverpod. And we're also going to add RX Dart, and then we'll get to that in a bit. It's just for one specific thing that just makes stuff a lot easier. So we'll have those packages there. And I also like to just kind of get some analysis options sort of configured right at the start. So what I just like to put in are these two rules here. This is just to get rid of that warning when you're not using const constructors. Now, this is usually just what I do in sort of like early development, because usually I'm building a lot of boilerplate and I don't want to just get all those warnings when I know it's not going to be a constant after. This is something I will disable later and then go through and do all the fixes I would need, but it does kind of just get in the way, I find, in the early prototyping stage. Okay, so we have that set up. We also have to just do something for our background audio. So I'm going to open my info.p list in iOS, and you'd want to do this in Mac as well if you're trying to build a Mac one. And for Android, there's some other instructions you can follow on the just audio. This just allows everything to work in the background. So for iOS, we're just going to add this key here at the bottom, UI background modes, and allow audio. Okay, so we got that stuff out of the way, and what we're going to do now, let's just get the project built. So I'll just go to my main.dart and make sure I have the simulator here set, and we're just going to hit the run button here. So before I ran, I just wanted to get those packages installed, because otherwise we'd have to rebuild, because there's some native stuff happening in there. While that's building, let's just clean some stuff up here. So I'm just going to go like this, and we're going to get rid of the debug check banner, which is usually my first thing that I do. That just removes that ugly little banner in the top right corner. And we'll get rid of our home page here. And this will change to something else in a moment. In fact, we're going to be just doing this in another file. So let's actually get some files set up. So I'm going to make a new folder called source. And just in my terminal, because I find it's a little bit quicker, let's go into lib and source. And we're going to make some directories. We're just going to keep this pretty simple and have a folder for screens, components, providers, models. And there'll probably be another one, but I'm not thinking of what it is right now. So now we have these lovely folders here. And look, we have our lovely counter app. And let's actually make our first screen here. So let's go, and we're going to make a screen called track list screen. And just do that. And we'll just start with a stateless component, call it track list screen. And we are going to be using Riverpod in here. So I'm actually going to, instead of using the stateless widget, I'm just going to use the consumer widget here. And the main difference we have to do is actually pass in a widget ref right here. And that's fine enough for now, because I just want to get something running. And we're just going to make our home our track list screen for this app. Now, everything I'm doing here, I'm trying to keep this really simple on the, the non-audio related things, but I have used the same methodology using things like GoRouter, or also using AutoRouter. So you can definitely use those things and follow along. This is just keeping that stuff fairly basic. So there we have that placeholder coming back, but of course we're going to want some kind of scaffold at least so that it looks a little bit better. And let's give it an app bar. Text, tracks, sure. And that's good enough for now. So now we have our lovely tracks. Okay, a couple other things we want to do because we're going to be using Riverpod. We're going to actually wrap this in the provider scope, just right at the top level, and we don't really need that const there. And we could put the const here, sure. And that'll allow us to access things within our anything below this, which is basically everything. We'll be able to access our providers and stuff like that. Another thing I want to do is we need to enable and essentially initialize our background audio stuff. So we're going to actually make our main function asynchronous just to make this a little bit easier. And we're going to enable our thing here. So basically right here, we're just going to wait just audio background on initialize and set some sort of configuration stuff. So that's going to run first, and then we're going to actually run the app after that. If we want to do this really properly, this is now a future that's returning void. Okay, so let's also create another screen, just our track detail screen. And I'm going to take our track list screen and literally just copy it and just change it to track detail screen, and we'll just call it track instead. Okay. So we're going to want a model that kind of represents our track object. So we're going to make that now, and I'm just going to call it track.dart, and it'll be a track. And it's going to have a few things here. And actually, just save a bit of time because it's really boring. We'll just copy this in. So we have track's going to have an ID, which is a string. So if you're storing this on Firebase, this could be just the record of that document. We're going to have a title, an artist, an audio URL, and an image URL. So pretty simple model. In the real world, I would use freezed for something like this to get a lot of the nice stuff like the to JSON and from JSON and just all the other great things that come with freezed. But yep, keeping this simple. Okay, so we have that. Let us now make a provider that's going to store all of our tracks. So I'm going to make this, and we're going to call it track list provider. So this isn't about playback or anything. This is just about the data that we're going to have. So we're going to call this track list provider, and it's going to extend state notifier. And what we're going to be storing here is a track, but it's going to be, a list of tracks. So this will have our list. And essentially, all we need to do here is go like this and do a super. And we're just going to start with the initialization as nothing, or an empty list rather. And we'll just call this track list provider equals state notifier provider. And we'll want to pass in what provider we're talking about. And of course, it's the track list provider. And what does the state look like? Well, it's a list of tracks. List of track, something I'm missing a guy there. And ultimately, when this is constructed, we just want to return the track list provider. Okay, so generally you'd have some kind of way to, maybe you're making a network request or Firebase or whatever to get it, but I'm not going to go into the details of all the ways we can do that. But in this init function, this is where you could make your network call or whatever. But I'm just going to not worry about the network because that's not the focus of this tutorial, and we're just going to sort of create some tracks. So all I'm going to do is set the state to a list, and I've already sort of set this up because typing this out would be annoying. So it's just a list of tracks, track model with the IDs, the titles, the artists, and so on and so forth. Okay, cool. So now what we can do is, let's just close some things here, and let's go back to our track list screen, and we're actually going to make a new component called track list, just to keep things really nice and simple. And here, this will be a stateless widget, track list, and it's going to be actually a consumer widget so that we have access to Riverpod. And if you don't want to use Riverpod for this, there's definitely, there's no reason you have to use Riverpod. It's just the state management I prefer. You can do this with block, you could do this with provider, you could do this just, with stateful widgets if you wanted to. Yeah. So here's our track list, and we're going to essentially return a list view .builder. And we need to get access to our tracks. So to get that, we can go final ref.watch. Final tracks equal ref.watch. And we want to do our track list provider. And if you'll see this, when we're watching just the provider itself, we're going to see it's a list of tracks. And that's actually all we'll need here. So then our item builder will return kind of one for each track. So we need to make sure we also have an item count set here, which will be our tracks.length, so it doesn't just keep going infinitely, otherwise it will. And in here, what is it, context and index? Cool. So I like to kind of just make a reference to the track by going tracks inside at that exact index, and then we might return text of the track dot title or something. So let's just make sure all this is working. The one thing we need to make sure we do is in our body of our scaffold, we actually want to use that track list. So now we should see, we do have to rebuild because I added the provider scope without actually doing a hard rebuild, but there's our lovely track list. So that's pretty cool, but let's actually make a component to represent our track list tile. And we'll just go track list tile, and it is also, in fact, this one I don't think we're going to need access to anything in Riverpod because we're going to be passing the track in specifically, so we'll just do that. And we'll go this dot track. So then over here we can actually just pass in our track list tile and pass in that track. And this is now going to return a placeholder, so it's probably going to look really bad. We're just going to get a bunch of placeholders there. But of course we will customize this to be a little bit better. So I'm thinking for this, and I'm just going to paste something in because this is just basic UI. Let's just go like this. And essentially it's just a card that's wrapped around a list tile where we're going to have the title as the track title, the subtitle as the artist. We're going to use image.network. Now similarly, I would probably use cached network image for this for many reasons, but again, trying to keep this very low dependency and focus on audio. So we just have the leading there, and we have a trailing of like a chevron, and then we just have an on tap event that's going to push us to the track detail screen, which I realize we need to allow a track to be passed in. So let's just do that real quick. Okay, cool. So let's just save that, and we'll save this. And now we have our lovely tracks coming in. Pretty simple. And if I click this, I will go here. So let's go to our track detail screen and actually do some fun stuff. Oh, we're already on it. So what do we want to add? I think we're going to have, in the body of this, we'll have a column. And I'm just going to wrap this column, although this might not be necessary. I'm going to wrap it in a line so that it kind of centers everything. Alignment.topCenter. And cool. And then we'll have some children. And let's just start with a couple things here. So again, just going to paste in a few things because they're not really that important to this. Oops, I have children twice. Okay, so I just have the image again with the slightly bigger size, the title, and the artist. And I'm just using headline large, headline medium. So if we click over here, we'll actually see, cool, there's the track, there's the artist name. Pretty fun. And then this is where we're going to eventually add, the play button and a progress bar too, so that you can kind of skip through. So that's all good. Let's figure out what to do next. So in the just audio docs and many of the examples, they are kind of managing the state of playback in a stateful widget, which I really don't like because as soon as the widget gets deconstructed, you leave the page, the audio is just going to stop playing. We want something a little more higher level than that. We're actually just going to use a Riverpod provider for this. So let's make something called Playback Provider. And again, you don't have to use Riverpod, you can use other things, but we are using Riverpod. So let's call this Playback Provider as expected, and it's going to extend state notifier. in this case, we're just going to be tracking a track. And it's nullable because if nothing's playing or nothing is in the queue or whatever, like we can have it to be null. Now here, playback provider, and we'll just initialize it with null. Oops, I wrote extend. It should be extends, of course. And okay, a couple things we want now is we need access to something called our audio session. So this is actually going to be a late final variable. And it's going to be of type audio session, which is one of the packages we installed. We'll just call it session. And then we also want an instance of our player. So we're just going to make this player, and it's going to be equal to an audio player. And before we forget, let's just make our final playback provider equals state notifier provider. And we just need to pass in these couple things here. And in this case, we will just return our playback provider like that. Oops. Sometimes, I forget to do this part, and it's a pretty important part, so that we can access it outside of this file. Okay, so we have that. Now, what we want to do is initialize everything. So I'm going to create a init function, async, and we want to make sure this initialization gets called right away. So I'm actually in my constructor here. We're just going to run the init function. We could technically put our code here, but then we'd miss out on the power of having it being asynchronous. We'd have to do things with thens, future.then, that kind of thing. So I like to just call the function and then allow us to have this as an async function here. So the first thing we want to do is instantiate that late variable of session. So we're going to go like here, and we're going to await audio session.instance. And then we also want to take our session and actually configure it. And there's various things you can pass into here, but we're going to pass in the audio, I think it's just .configure. We're going to pass in audio session configuration, and in this case, there's a pre-built one called music. So you can pass in other things in here for speech, for whatever, but we want it to kind of be meant for music, which really just tells the operating system like what should happen when a phone call comes in or whatever. Okay, cool. So what we can also do in our initialization is sort of set a listener. So we're going to be listening on the player state stream. So we'll just go .listen, and that gets us an event, and we'll be able to do some stuff here. React to things. This will kind of fire when the audio pauses or plays or whatever. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now we also need a way to load in a track. So we're just going to make this will be a future void. Won't return anything, and we'll just call it load. Maybe we'll call it load track. Nah, load's fine. And we're going to pass in a track in this case. So the first thing I want to do is when we load, we're actually going to set the state of this provider to that track. Then we're going to create a audio source. So this requires us to import in the just audio package, but basically a source, we're going to use URI. Now say you want to play back local files, there's other constructors here, there's file, there's asset, asset being one that you've kind of put in your code base that's in your pub spec, and file being one maybe you've downloaded it locally to the documents folder of the device. But we're going to use URI because these are network based things. So first we pass in the audio URL, we just have to parse it first, and then we actually create what's called a media item, and this kind of allows the operating system to show like a preview of it by passing in the artwork or the title or the artist, and we need an ID too just to know that it's unique. And then the last thing I want to do is actually go take our player and go set audio source, and we'll pass in that source, and I forgot to mark this as async, so let's just do that. And then another function we're going to need in the future is essentially clearing it out and stopping. So I've made something just called stop and clear, and it will first stop the player and set the state to null. So that's mostly what we need for this. And there's a couple other things we'll be adding in the future, like for this, and we also want some, we're also going to want a way to sort of check the playback progress, meaning, how many seconds we're into it, but we'll get the basics working and come back to this in a moment. Let's get our play button working. So we're going to make something called track play button. Dart. and we'll make it a stateless widget, track play button, and we will be again using a consumer widget here. And let's just start by returning an icon button. And for this, we will use the play. I think it's just play arrow, it's called. So let's just start with that. Really basic. And let's open up our track detail screen. And basically after all these things, we'll just add our track play button. Now the track play button, we're going to want to also pass in the track. So let's just do track, and let's go back to it to make sure that we're doing it. Okay, so if I save this again, we should see we have a lovely play button here. We could probably, you know, make the icon size bigger, which I'm going to do. Sorry, I'm doing this in the wrong place. Back in the play button, let's just make it size 38. So it's a little bit bigger. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a play pause button. It might be play, it might be pause, but we need a way to track that. So we'll go back to our playback provider here, and we're going to use a notifier for this. So I'm going to do it right here, and we're going to call this is playing notifier. And this is going to be of type, we're going to construct a value notifier, and by default it'll be false. And we just want to say what kind of value this will be. So it's going to be a Boolean value. And then we have this little to-do here. So down here, we can essentially check that event. So we can go if event.playing. So anytime this changes, if it's playing, we are going to take our is playing and set its value to true. Otherwise, we're going to set it to false. So now having this notifier here allows us in our track play button to essentially know whether it's playing or not. But in order to listen to that, we need to wrap this widget in a value. Usually when I like to wrap in any kind of builder, I wrap in a normal builder, just sets it up a little bit closer to what we need. And then we use value listener builder. And the listenable is going to be the provider, which we need access to. So let's get that. In this case, playback provider.notifier, because we're talking about the provider class itself, not the state. So we need to put notifier there. And right here we go provider.isPlaying notifier. And then right here, the second value is that. And we actually don't really care too much about the third value, which we can just denote with an underscore. This would be like a widget, but we don't need that. So now we have this, and we know, okay, if it's playing and all that kind of stuff. Now we also, because this play button is going to be used on multiple tracks, we don't just want to be like, hey, if it's playing, show a pause button. If it's pause, show a play button, because it would be global within the app. Multiple tracks are going to use this. So we actually need a value called isCurrentTrack. And for that, we're going to make something called currentTrack. And in this case, instead of reading, we're going to be watching. And we're not going to be watching the notifier, we're going to be watching the state. So we can now have isCurrentTrack. We're going to take the currentTrack.id. Now this is a nullable thing, so we can basically just have this question mark here. And if that is equal to the track we've passed into this widget's ID, then we know we're on the current track. So essentially down here in our onPressed event, first of all, let's check, if the current track is already the one that's either, it could be playing, it could be paused, but is it the one that's in their state right now? If it is, we want to then check if is playing. Oops, I realized this should say is playing, not is player. So if it's playing, we essentially want to pause, and we can just go provider.player.pause. Otherwise, in that case, we want to go provider.player.play. So that'll kind of toggle between playing and pause. Now, in the case that it's a different track, or the track could be null, we want to load that. So we'll go provider.load, and here we pass in the track object, and we go provider.player.play, because we want to not just load it, but also play it back. So let's see if that works. So we are, probably can't hear the audio very well, but it is playing back. And if I click it again, it pauses. So it kind of did this loading first, and then it was the current track, so it paused. That was kind of the flow. Now, naturally, we want our play arrow to change to a pause arrow. So we can do something, we can go the icon. If, you know, it is current track and is playing, then we want this to actually be icons.pause, otherwise a play button. So now if we go back here, we should see it toggle. And it's working great. Okay, so we have our basic playback working. And what's cool is we can actually, you know, be playing this and leave this screen and go to another one and click this, and it will load that new one, and we can pause this. So it's nice. It's, you know, the state of the playback isn't on a specific widget. It's kind of higher up in our singleton here of the playback provider, and we are good to go. Now let's do a couple more fun things. So I'm going to go back to my playback provider, and we're going to add a new thing. And I'm going to paste this one in because it's a little bit of a doozy, but we're going to have a getter, and actually need a model to represent this. So we could put this in another file, but it's really only needed here. So we created this class called position data, which has a position, a buffer, and a duration. And this is, you know, on the given track, what position are we at, how much has been buffered, and what is the total length of that track. And this is where the one thing we're going to use rxstart for. It just allows you to sort of take a stream and actually combine things together. It has this combine latest function, which this is just a great way to do it. So we've created this stream called position data stream, and it's basically a stream that's going to be watching our player's position stream, our buffered and whatever, and set that right here. I can probably add a comma here to make it a little prettier. Let's see. Doesn't look that much better, but yeah, this is just a way that we can essentially be watching stuff. And just to, I guess, see what this could look like, let us create a new thing here. So actually, let's make this in its own file. We're going to call this track progress bar.dart, and we'll start with a stateless widget, track progress bar. And this, we will need access to state, so let's change this to a consumer widget. And of course, we need our widget ref here. And let's just kind of take some text, and we'll just, you know, say hello, and just make sure all this is hooked up. So here we'll have our track progress bar. And I think for this, we also are going to have to pass in a track. And this is just so we know we're talking about the current one or not, which you'll see in a minute. Oops. Okay, so now we have that and that, and we should see now on the bottom of this just the word hello. So let's actually work with that stream. So in this case, what we're going to do is actually wrap this in a stream builder. So, actually, we already have that as an option. So we're going to wrap it in a stream builder, and the type is going to be that position data. There we go. That's the kind of data that's going to be in it. And the stream we want to use is the provider stream. So, you know, we obviously need to get access to that. And I'm going to do a couple fun things here. So we're going to get our playback provider. We're also going to just track what the current track is just by watching that. And for this demo, I don't want to show the progress bar if we're not actually like playing that current track. So we're just going to return a size box if it's not the current track, basically. So here that's now gone away, but we should see it come back as soon as, you know, that comes in. Okay, so with that being said, now we can get our stream. So here we're going to just go provider.position data stream. And our we're able to get our position data right in here. We can just go final position data equals, and we just go snapshot.data. So that'll actually be that position data object with the with those three parameters. And let's just kind of see how this would work. So we can actually just kind of go position data dot position, for instance, and let's just, you know, maybe do that. So we'll actually see as it's playing, this is actually changing, which is kind of cool. And just as a recap, basically all we're doing in our playback provider is we are combining these players' three things using Rx, and it's a stream, so the stream builder can listen to it and react accordingly. Now, instead of returning a just text, we are going to instead return a progress bar. So this is a package we also installed in our pub spec. This is the audio video progress bar package. And it works really well because we can just pass in that position data, the progress, the buffered, and the total. And there's some other configuration, like if we want to show the time stuff, I have them set to none, but I can show you how that would look. So here we have it, and this now moves along, and you can even do this. And the reason that works is because we have an on-seek event on the progress bar, and all we're doing is talking to our provider and taking the player and seeking to that duration. Now, if I turn this off, we'd actually see, some time stuff there, which, maybe that's actually a cool idea. Let's keep it. All right, something else I want to add, though, to this is the ability to kind of go back and forward. Now, we could just as easily do that here and here, but I don't know. I think it makes sense to put it next to these things. So we're going to just wrap this in a row. Wrap in a row, and we're going to make this wrapped in and expanded so that it takes up as much room as possible. But right before here, we're going to have an icon button, and I'm just going to throw it in here to not waste time, because all this is we have a bit of padding, and we have this icon button that's the replay 10. So you'll see right here, we got this little 10-second thing here. And there's just an on-press event, and we basically just look at the player's position, and we subtract 10 seconds from it. But if that ends up being negative, we set to 0. So say you were at only 3 seconds, you went back, it's not going to go to -7, it's just going to go to 0. And then we just seek to it. And similarly, we will add one for the next. This one's a little bit easier because we don't have to worry about getting to negative time. Where do I want this? Right here, I guess. Nope. One after. And there we go, and we can just kind of skip through. Oh, that was the same one. So there we have it. This one plays back. It only shows up if it's the current track. All right. So that's most of what I wanted to show. Now, there's one other thing I would like to do. I love apps that sort of have a, because something that could annoy me is I click on this, I'm playing it, and I how do I stop that song? Oh, which one is it? Which one is it? Right? I don't know. Let's try and find it, and there it is. So let's build something that can kind of show the global playing state. So let's start by making a new file. We'll call it playback bottom bar dart. Now let's just start with a stateless widget and playback bottom bar, and we will use a consumer widget again. And let's just, for now, return some text that says hello. Okay, now in order to keep this sort of global, what we need to do is we'll go to our main.dart. And in here, we can pass in an optional parameter called builder. And this takes context and then the child widget that would come out. And just to show how this works, let's just return child. And it could be null, but we know it won't be null because home is not null. And this won't change anything. We've kind of just overridden sort of the most common version of this. But what we can do is actually wrap this in, first of all, a column. And I'm going to wrap the child itself in an expanded. And we're going to wrap this whole thing just in a material widget, just because we're going to be putting stuff in and that isn't within a scaffold necessarily, and we'll get weird text happening. So like that. Now nothing will change again because we just have a column with this, but in theory, I can put text here and say hello, and we'll actually see it down there. It's kind of covered because there's no safe area guide around it. I can put it at the top. So just a nice way that you can have something sort of global, that's available on all routes. So no matter what, I'm seeing that thing, right? So let's actually use that this guy right here. We'll just inject it and put it there, and we should kind of get that same sort of thing. hello. Okay. Now, in our bottom bar, we're going to be doing something a little more fancy than just the word hello. So similarly, we've seen this pattern a lot. We're going to get access to our provider and the current track being played. And if there isn't a track being played, we don't even want to show this, right? And by played, I don't like you could technically be pausing and still want to see it. Just meaning if there isn't one in that in our provider, there's no need to show this thing. But if there is, let's show the word hello for now. So let me just do a green arrow rebuild. And we should see that word hello pop in as soon as we start playing something. Wicked. Okay, so for real now, what we're going to be doing is, this is similar to the play button. So I'm going to wrap my hello in a builder, and it's going to be a value listener builder. And the value listenable is going to be our provider.isPlaying notifier. That's just so we know if the track is playing versus is paused. Instead of this, let's actually make a container, and we can kind of decorate this a bit. I'm just going to grab a quick decoration right here. And what's really important is whatever's inside this box. So let's get our child, and let's just put our text back again. Test. So let's just see how this actually looks. We kind of get this. And what we need to do is, let's first of all make the width of this thing double.infinity to take up as much room as possible, so we actually get it like that. Now there's a problem because, you know, stuff's outside of our safe area, so I don't want to wrap this with the safe area because I want the purple to touch the bottom, but I want to wrap its contents with a safe area. So we'll just use safe area. Now if you see, you're actually going to get kind of safety on both. All we care about in this case is the bottom. So with our safe area, we can actually say, we can set top to false so that it doesn't actually try and create safe area on the top, because we know it's going to be safe. It's right there. We just want the bottom safe area. Cool. So now we have this. And within here, we are going to want, let's start with a row and give it some children. So here we're going to kind of create our own play button. Now this one doesn't really care what track is playing, as long as there's one playing, so we don't have to worry about the whole is current track, all that kind of stuff. So let me just put this in here. It's very basic, and I made this typo again somehow, is playing. So now we'll have a play button here, and this will actually, because it's working with the same provider, do the play and pause, and we do the same logic as playing. The one thing we don't care about is what track it is, as long as something's playing, you know, we want this. And what's cool, because we're using these notifiers, is we'll actually see if I can, I guess I'll just start this one. You actually can, you know, control both with one because they're all listening to the same notifier. Okay, then I think what would be nice is, it'd be nice to know what you're listening to. So just gonna paste this one in because it has nothing to do with audio really, but within our row, we're gonna have an expanded, and we're gonna have a column, and we're gonna have the title of the track and the artist of the track, just using some, you know, random font sizes that look okay. So that's cool. And then we're actually going to put at the very end of, after this expanded, we're going to put an icon button. And this is just going to allow someone to kind of like close the player and stop the music. So let's just use icons.close for that. And we need to set its color. It's going to use black, so colors.white. So now we have this nice little X there. And what we want to do is, we've already made this function, just provider.stop and clear. There you have it. So now we have this sort of thing, and if I click the X, it'll actually kind of fully stop everything until you go and start a new one. So that's cool. Last thing is, you know, and what's cool about this is, yeah, I can explore around, and this will keep playing, and everything's great. It'll always stay there. It's persistent. Now, the last thing, I think it'd be nice to have sort of a progress bar on here. So, but I don't want to, you know, I don't think it needs to be interactive, just kind of giving a sense of what you're listening to. So let's take this row and actually wrap it in a column, and we'll make sure that we go main axis size .min, because we don't want this to just try and take up all the space. It'll, you know, probably be a problem. Let's just put I'm just going to the first thing in this, we're going to have a container. And we'll make its width the whole thing, double dot infinity. And let's just use a height of like 4. And we're going to give it a color. And we'll just use like color dot white, you know, maybe white 54. So it's like slightly transparent white. And we're going to put a child in here. And it's going to have an align, because we want this child to be aligned to the center left. So alignment dot center left. And it is going to have a child of another container. Okay, and let's just give this a width of maybe like 60 temporarily, and we'll give it the same height as 4, and we'll give it a color, colors dot, I think maybe white, maybe we do something really fun. Let's make it colors dot pink or something. So we'll actually see now we have this sort of like starting progress bar sort of thing happening here, which is kind of cool. And what we actually want to do is, you know, have this move with us. So we can essentially kind of duplicate that same thing that we did before, and we'll wrap this whole thing in a stream builder. And it's going to be, again, of type position data. And its stream is going to be that provider dot position data stream. Now, what we need here is, let's just get our final position data equals snapshot dot data. And in the case that it's null, so if position data equals null, we kind of want to just, you know, return, I'm just going to return a sized box with a height of 4 that doesn't have anything, but just take up the same amount of space so you don't get weird jumpiness happening. But assuming it isn't null, we need to basically figure out what do we want to make this value. So this is a pretty simple calculation. We're just going to make it width, value called width, and we're essentially going to take the position data dot position, and we'll just do it in milliseconds. You could technically use seconds. This will just make it a little more smooth. So in milliseconds, I'm going to divide that by the position data dot duration in milliseconds. So that'll give us a fraction of how, you know, basically a percent of how far along. And what we can do is we can then just, you know, multiply this by media query dot of context, dot size dot width, which will give us, you know, the full width. Now, if this was not something going width to width on the screen, we need to wrap this in some kind of layout builder so we know how much width we have to access, but this is screen edge to screen edge, so we know that this is the full width. And we can just change this here to use this value. And we should now be able to play, and we'll see it move along. Okay, well, that's basically it for this tutorial. And I hope you enjoyed watching it and learned a few things. And again, you know, using Riverpod, not a requirement for this at all. But you know, it's the way I wanted to just do it. And similarly, you know, you can use routing packages. I've used AutoRouter for this sort of process. I've used GoRouter, and you know, it's not something that gets in your way. Just trying to keep things as simple as possible on the non-audio front. Something that's kind of cool about this is that I never really touched on is, and hopefully it worked, we can actually see the album artwork playing back there and a progress bar there. And I believe if you actually run this on a device and on a simulator, you'll get the play and pause buttons and stuff like that. So there you have it. That is the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.